If you've been collecting watches for more than a year, chances are you bought a piece that you regret. Not the piece that's down 5%, not the piece that took longer to sell. I'm talking about the watch that the second you put it on your wrist, you just knew it wasn't right. Today, we're admitting something that most collectors have never said out loud, that everyone has a regret piece. In fact, it's part of the journey. So, what is a regret piece? A regret piece is not always a bad watch. Sometimes it's the watch that you bought that was a hype driven purchase. It was an emotional rebound buy. It's something you purchased because you were bored of your collection, but you weren't quite sure what you were going to get next. Maybe it's a piece that everyone has. It's a piece that you thought the resale would be much higher. Or it's a piece that you thought was a deal, but in actuality, it just wasn't a deal. If we were being honest with ourselves, we would understand that the regret piece is usually not about the watch. It's just about misalignment with the rest of your collection. Now, in my mind, there's three types of regret purchases. You have the hype trap. Now, this is a piece you saw everywhere and you were convinced that it was going to increase in value. It's a piece that you convinced yourself would be fun. It's not necessarily a piece that fits you. Maybe it is a interesting Rolex with a diamond dial. Maybe it is a Breitling diver that you just weren't feeling. You didn't buy it again because it fit your collection. You bought it because everyone had it or because it was the next hottest thing on Reddit or eBay. Everybody was talking about it. In my mind, honestly, that's been the Land Dweller as of recently. The Land Dweller is a wonderful piece, but I think it does fit into that hype purchase category. Now, the second one is the smart financial move. This piece is something that you wouldn't normally get, but you see it as a deal. Maybe it is a limited edition piece, or you're getting it because it has all the box and papers. It's not a piece that you like, it's just a piece that you feel you should have. Honestly, I think it's the most dangerous of the three because it's the one that, in my mind, you can justify the most. You could say, oh, it wasn't really a watch that I liked, but it was just at a price I couldn't say no. And if you've been in the watch world long enough, you see that happen all the time. An example of this is we recently had a client buy an Omega Globemaster. It's a wonderful piece, but it was the first piece in his collection that was different than what we had normally gotten him. And it had just gotten out of Japan. It was one of the few pieces that came from Japan originally that we sourced specifically for him. And it just, in my mind, didn't fit his natural buyer aesthetic. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad piece. It's just a piece that I would file under that category of just too good to say no to. Now, the last one I think is the most difficult to admit and also the most difficult to pinpoint, and that's the identity crisis watch. It is the watch that was purchased for the person that you thought you should be or that you thought you should become. A great example of this is a lot of first-time watch buyers who buy a Black Submariner as a first piece because they just feel like they should have a Submariner. Maybe it is someone who's experimenting with their first all gold piece and then go with a gold Hugo King Power just because they heard that it's cool. I think that this piece holds a lot of interest because again it's a piece that as soon as most people wear it you just see it as a financial mistake. Again, it's something to talk about with a client that we had that bought a solid gold King Power, and after a couple days you just realize it wasn't for him, but the resale value just wasn't there. And so he took a bath, and it's always unfortunate when that happens. We try to guide the client through that process as intelligently as we can with all the knowledge at our disposal. But I think the identity crisis watch is something that everyone falls into. For me, it was getting these watches that were a bit daintier for my wrist. I like dress watches, but I was experimenting with 26, 27, even 33 millimeters in my personal collection, and it just wasn't a good fit. And I would have to convince myself that it was because I wanted to be someone who could wear watches that small. And that's how you get stuck in that trap. Now, it's not all bad when you buy a regret watch. Something that nobody talks about, in my view, is that buying a regret watch really sharpens your taste, helps you figure out what's a good fit, what's too big, what's too small, but also what you like. You can put on something because you thought it was cool and that everybody would like it, like an OP in a very unique color, and just decide that, hey, you enjoy more muted colors or you enjoy more neutral colors like blacks and grays. And that even though everyone is running around with the lavender OP, it's just not for you. Or, hey, as watches have been trending more thin, maybe you tried that JLC ultra thin or you tried that AP and it just wasn't for you. So you want to stick with your big 45 millimeter, 47 millimeter pattern. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that if you wouldn't have bought that regret piece, you wouldn't have known what you like. And again, it's all just part of the journey. But the important thing to remember is that everybody has their regret piece sometime in their journey of watch collecting. And the difference between amateurs and collectors is an amateur will hide it. They'll say no, that they always love this piece and they're glad to have it on their wrist and they're glad they picked it up. But a professional, they learn from it. They say, you know what, I tried a bunch of these smaller dress watches, and even though I think they're cool, it's just not for me. And I love it when a collector goes through that because they start to refine their taste, which makes it easier for someone like me to find them the watch that they want. And at the end of the day, my job is to connect buyers and sellers to the watches that they're trying to buy and sell. And so I'm super grateful to have that opportunity and to learn from these mistakes that these collectors are making. And I'm also super grateful that you guys made it through the video. So leave a comment below on any mistakes you might have made in the past. And if you have a regret piece, don't be afraid to share it. I'm looking forward to the next one. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Now, there's 4 questions that I would ask myself to avoid buying a regret piece in the future. The first of which is, if nobody saw this watch on my wrist, would I still want it? A vast majority of time, that helps you with that first mistake because you'll start to identify, hey, you know what? I didn't really want this piece. I just wanted it because all my friends were talking about it. Second of which is, this piece does not go up in value in the next 5 years. Do I still see it in the collection? That is something that prevents you from buying watches that you think will go up in value because you think that it was a smart financial decision. Buy what you like. That's what I always say. People say watches are investments. I think they can be stores of value, but they're not always investments. The third question that I think is super important to ask yourself is basically, does it fit my real life? If you are somebody who is a chef or you're somebody who works in the hospital and you're not going to be wearing gold all the time, or maybe you work from home and diamond watch just doesn't fit your lifestyle. If it's not something that fits your lifestyle, don't feel pressure to get it. And so, in that regard, the amount of times that I have said, hey, you know what, this would be cool. For example, I think that the AP, I'm not the AP, I'm sorry, the Rolex Challenger is a wonderful piece. I think it's really interesting. I think it's really unique what they did. And it's just a behemoth of a watch. It's not for me. I have a 7.5 inch wrist. I'm not going to pretend that it's not going to look like a flying saucer. And the last question is, if there was no resale value for this piece, is this something I would want? So again, that's something that'll help you with that second trap, which is, hey, I bought this watch because I thought that it would go up in value, or I thought it was a good investment. Buy the Hublot Tutti Frutti if you want it. But if it doesn't go up in value, or if there's no resale market for this really niche Vacheron, and I think that's how you should be looking at watches from a collector standpoint. As an investor, it's very different. I run my business and the watches I keep in my inventory very differently than the watches I keep for my personal collection.